reason for not bringing her back, except for 2 people that didn't think that, and there might be more, thought that somebody else should have a chance. Well, there's other slots. So there you go. So with that, I have something to say. Okay.
As there's no surprise here that I don't agree with our city attorney, and I don't trust his judgment, even if he does make $1.5 million. But a motion to reconsider a vote in a motion limited in both the time it is made and the person who makes it is, when there's a tied vote, the people that can make a reconsideration are the people that voted no. And it has to be done in the same meeting. And we did not make a motion to continue the item. You and Bonnie decided to continue the item because it's on YouTube. You can pull it up. Even though it does state in the beginning of the meeting that our mayor said that it was the May 15th meeting, it actually was the May 28th meeting. There are a lot of wrong things that keep going on here, and this can't even be about Lori. We can't follow rules. We can't follow the investment policy until I scream for 2 years. We are not following Robert's Rules of Order. It's very clear in Robert's Rules of Order. The motion to reconsider is subject to some unique limitations. It must be made on the same day as the meeting in which the motion was to be considered, and it must be made by the person who voted in the prevailing side of the motion to be reconsidered.
This isn't a motion to reconsider because no actual motion passed.
Right, it failed. That's in our minutes.
Motion failed. There was no other counter motion. There was
and so that's how we're going to run this town. We have Bonnie's Rules of Order now? Is that what we're going to do? We're just going to bring it back and bring it back and bring it back? Oh, I missed a meeting. Let's just come back and vote again. There are Robert's Rules of Orders, and it is very clear. There is no question in here. And you, again, are going to give us your advice. Oh, but hey, you can count to 3. So, of course,
Please be respectful.
You are interrupting. You're interrupting. You can count to 3. And so you're going to say what you need to say to protect your 3. That's very clear. But I will continue and move on to the next subject.
I don't provide
about
legal
Mrs.
advice
death.
just based on what 3 council members want.
Well, you don't show that, and I question the integrity of your decisions way too many times.
Because you disagree with the outcome. I'm sorry about that.
Because I don't think that you always are putting the city of Hemet first. We can put this person first or that person first or somebody else's goals first, but the city of Hemet is why we're here. Now, moving on from that, Ms. Van Arsdale does absolutely represent what the city of Hemet has done, and she has. And so this, Lori, is not about you not having this position. It's about getting the community involved and getting new members involved. I question if being on Sabova's Economic Development Foundation would be a conflict, because they're trying to bring and develop land and bring businesses. And so if the business wants to come to Hemet or to here, how are you going to decide? It's going to put you in a position that is very hard. I mean, because you're Hemet first, but you're you know what I'm saying? It's a hard situation.
I want to speak to that, Laura.
And for the citizens to know that the right decision is going to be made, that's a AB 1234. That is ethics that we just took. We have to know that we can trust her decision regardless of her loyalties, and the citizens have to know that.
So, Lori Van Arsdale, the subject of your discussion here. Number one, I think that it would be no different than if Mike had something that he had that was on the agenda that might be in conflict with whatever he does in business. It would be no different than anybody else. I really have always been very careful whenever something's a conflict to make sure that I abstain. So if there was anything that the Economic Development Corporation was doing in the city and it had to come before the Planning Commission, of course I would abstain. the other thing is I kind of, it's been hard to sit and listen to people attacking me as personally and as my character, and especially when you bring up the Ramona Bowl. There's a bunch of us that have worked hard and long, long years to keep that place going. And is it old? Yeah, it's 97 years old. And we work every day to try to raise money. And keep in mind that the Ramona Bowl gets no tax dollars other than what you donate on your sponsorship. And so we work really, really hard. And things like the cold rags that are in the coolers, that's when people are extra hot, and it helps them. So we do that. It's not anything that's bad, and it's everybody, you know, the hundreds and hundreds of volunteers that help make that place work. So I really resent that coming up because we all work like crazy to make that place go and to keep it going. As far as anything else that I might be involved in, if there's anything else I'm involved in, because I'm on the Western Science Center, I'm on a bunch of other boards and commissions. You saw my resume. I don't do it because I want to bring it to the Planning Commission and do anything wrong. So my hope was that I could contribute, and I didn't intend to reapply until I got asked. And I was hoping to be able to contribute because there's some base knowledge that I found in several different Planning Commission meetings that they, Burke Williams and Sorensen didn't know, but I was here when it happened, so I could explain it. And it's not that you bring it up all the time. We were very, very, I'm very, very knowledgeable about the fact that there needs to be new blood doing things. But I'm also very, very cognizant, and I think it has caused huge problems in the city of Hemet because you don't have some institutional knowledge that could be helpful. And I wish, if you guys have concerns, please talk to me. Nobody has called me personally, not them, not you guys. So I'm happy to talk about it. But truly, I do have the city's best interest in mind. Always have. It's in my heart. And it's just the same as anything else that I do in town. In downtown, yeah, we worked hard. We did do something new. We did bring the library there. That really helped kick off some things. But you've got to have property owners that are willing. So, but I assure you, Carly, that there's not something that would come to us if it had anything to do with anything else that I'm involved with. I'm very, very, very aware of that, and I feel the same.
Thanks, Laura. And again, my reasoning was because of that institutional knowledge, and there were so many people leaving the city that don't have it, that didn't provide that anymore. And I thought it was important to have somebody on the Planning Commission that could provide that information, and that's why I hope to bring it back. So, with that, any other comments from council? Then I'd like a motion.
All in favor of breaking the Brown Act, or I'm sorry, of not listening to Robert's Rules of Orders?
Well, according to our attorney, we aren't breaking any rules, so.
Well, if you
you're
would
an
read
attorney,
it,
then I guess
if you would read it, you wouldn't need an attorney to know. But I guess that's how we do it in Hemet. The majority wins. It doesn't matter what the
So
rules
if
are.
I don't have a motion, I don't have a motion. Okay,
I'll make a motion that we reappoint Lori Van Arsdale to the Planning Commission to fill a term expiring April 1st, 2021.
What she said was she was only going to fill in part-time.
do I have a second?
This is a full-time appointment, right?
It is.
2-year?
It is.
I'll second.
Please vote. That passes 3-2. Item number 7.
And it was actually pulled by Mary Ann Darwin, but since she's gone, I don't think she's going to questions forward.
Okay, so do I have a motion?
I'll move approval.
Please vote.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear who that was.
And Mike. Okay, that passes 5-0. Item 11, recommendation by police, Homeland Security Program grant. Oh, if you can, I will.
Mayor Pro Tem, thank you for holding this item tonight so we get a chance to discuss it. Hopefully I can lighten up the mood a little bit. I'm just sorry that Pat's not here to hear the good news. So contact her tomorrow and let her know that we have some good news going on tonight. So what I have bringing you tonight is a award for a competitive bid, or a competitive grant that we were awarded for $212,000 through Homeland Security. That is, Homeland Security puts specific requirements on their grants, so we had to fall within the requirements. As you know, we are working on upgrading our radio system. So what we will do with this grant is purchase 27 radios for our units. We traditionally try to use our radios as long as we can, so we'll upgrade them, move them to another unit. But this will just about get all of our units to where we need to be, ready for that new radio system. These are P25 compliant, so they can be encrypted. We can talk with other units from other areas around us on the PSEC system. It's really a feather in our cap, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention Shirley Johnson's name. She's not here tonight, but because of the relationship that she has made with Riverside County MD, we basically got twice the amount that we put in for. So really good job for her, and we're really excited about this and hoping that this helps us get our equipment where we need to be.
Well, thank you, and that's basically the reason that I pulled this item, because I thought it was important that you have an opportunity to expound a little bit on something that might have just kind of been glossed over as part of the consent calendar. And particularly the interoperability with different organizations and agencies, because Hemet PD does participate on a wide variety of task force and operations, and in a catastrophic event, you'd be talking with other agencies that we don't even work with on task force. So the interoperability is crucial in my mind, just from the fact that every disaster exercise I ever participated in, every real-world event that I ever participated in, when you do the after-action debrief, one of the top things that comes up as a problem was communication. So moving in this direction is critical to being efficient and safe. So I appreciate that, and wonderful news about them doubling their request. So with that, I'm happy to move approval.
Second.
Please vote. So, okay. That passes 5-0. Thank you. Now we have item 12.
And I really didn't want to hear too much about this. I just brought it up because, and I'm trying to find the legislation, the bill number in Sacramento, that deals with the number of cannabis dispensaries in a ratio of 1 to 4 to liquor licenses. And since you were so good at pointing out that we have 144 establishments in the city limits of Hemet with liquor licenses, that would mean we would be able to allow 36 recreational dispensaries. We would be mandated to have at least 36 dispensaries here in the city. So,
Yes, interesting legislation. I'm not sure what the tie is between the marijuana and the alcohol licenses, but
I don't
it is
know.
Sacramento. So.
yeah, that was the only reason I wanted to pull this, was to
Well, let me
make
talk about it real quick.
that up. Yes.
In regards to this is an ABC grant that was also a competitive grant that was written by one of our detectives, Detective Wilson, and is what it is it's $51,000 that we can use for different operations. Alcohol beverage control really likes us to focus on operation-driven successes, so we use it for shoulder tap operations where we're trying to get people. We use something like our explorers to go in and ask someone, hey, will you buy me beer or whatever. And we received this grant a few years ago, so generally every few years we'll put back in to just make sure We also will be doing business checks on businesses that are selling alcohol, and there's a large education component that we can also help out not only business owners, but also our citizens. So we're really happy to get this. Like I said, it was a competitive grant, so we got exactly what we wanted, and really happy about that also.
Well, you know, I'm happy.
Two grants in a row.
Question on that,
Go ahead.
if I can, that on the, with working with the actual establishments, do you do educational processes on their signage and availability, like if it's in a grocery store or
Most certainly, some of that will
convenient for younger people?
will definitely be included, yes.
Okay, thank you.
I do want to say that between public safety and public works, that's an additional $351,058. So I want to thank everybody for their efforts. It's incredible, and we look forward to seeing more of that. But great job.
And I will move approval.
Please vote. Mike.
Thank you, Chief.
That passes 5-0. Good. Yeah, we have 15. Item 15, recommendation by information technology.
I just wanted to point out, one of the things that we talked about at the very beginning of the budget process was we needed to replace some computers. And so we challenged the team to determine ways to not have an additional allocation for fiscal year 1920. And so we've been able to put together some savings across all of our departments to make these necessary purchases, because the bulk of these computers will no longer be useful come January 1, 2020. And so it's out of necessity that we're having to take this route. We have we've had some conversations with IT to really explore items related to, I've got my Surface Pro right here. Instead of having a separate desktop computer in my office, how can I hook this up to monitors so that we don't have double the amount of computers? And so for the remaining computers that we will need to purchase, that's one of the things that Scott will be working on moving forward, because there are quite a number of management folks here at the City of Hemet that do have a tablet. So if I can get the the docking station for the Surface, that frees up the computer that can be utilized for someone else in the agency. So that's some of the things that we're talking about right now, so we can lessen the amount of purchases that we make moving forward. So just wanted to provide that as a preliminary discussion prior to Scott presenting this item.
Okay, so I'll go into my question in just a moment. I can comment first. There's been recent malware attacks. Cities have been hit hard. I'm on the assumption that all of these attacks are on Windows-based operating systems because they're easier to attack. So I'm just going to go on a limb and say I'm a little partial, but looking at these costs, looking at the cost that we're going to be spending on Dell computers that are Windows-based, with the computer, the operating system, the software that will go with it, it's equivalent to the cost of a Mac. And the reason why I'm partial to this is that these are a little more resilient when it comes to malware attacks and virus attacks. Is this something that we could look at to maybe protect the integrity of our system and our database?
Sure. When it comes to the Macintosh computers, one of the bad parts is there's still not a lot of business-related applications that are designed for them. So when it comes to our ERP systems and things like that, those are still primarily built around Windows and Microsoft infrastructure. So even if we could, and when we can, utilize just about any device anymore, be it a tablet or a Mac or a Windows computer, we would have to virtualize that instance of that software, and that would still be susceptible to Windows-type attacks.
And I'm on board with that. However, I know that a lot of these software moving forward is all cloud-based. And the nice thing about a Mac is a lot of this software is built into it, and it's a lot of it's more powerful than what is available on a Windows-based PC. Just my question. So I just wanted to throw that in more specifically about the attacks that cities are seeing on their systems with ransomware and that kind of thing.
Sure. Those type of attacks, they're based a lot on Windows-based operating systems. The majority of those are based, and they're really coming around to Windows 7. Windows 7, Windows XP, a lot of the older Windows platforms, they're no longer being or going to no longer be maintained. So a lot of those vulnerabilities are more prevalent. They're out there. We just recently received, there was, I think it was in Forbes, a message from the NSA stating that if you had Windows 7, you better take and get rid of it quick. Windows 10 is not susceptible to some of the attacks that Windows 7 is. So those are the types of things that we're seeing. A lot of those things were tools that were just brought out by different groups. And they've been, once those things kind of get out of the box, they're out, and people use those. With a lot of them, they just don't have the they just don't see the benefit of trying to protect people. So you get a lot of those things where they're being utilized as a tool that, it originally was intended for the benefit of somebody or to try to prevent an attack or something like that. Now they're being used to create attacks. So the benefit of those applications are kind of getting wore off, and they're being used for nefarious use.
I did notice in your staff report, too, that precautions are going to be taken with the computers that were retiring from service.
Correct, yes.
To protect or basically, what do I say, bleach bit?
Yes, yeah.
However you're going to do it.
Sure. What we wind up doing
make
is
sure that we eliminate any likelihood that people can get any data off of that.
correct, yes. What we wind up doing is we take those physical hard drives, any kind of storage device out of those machines, and we physically damage them, crush them, make sure that they're not capable of being read by somebody else. Again, to pull out that kind of data and to pull out that information to be used for nefarious uses.
And just a quick question, a little bit off topic, but since we have you here.
Sure.
We currently use leases for our copy machines, is that right?
Yes.
And so when a copy machine is taken out of service and is replaced or upgraded with a new one, what assurance do we have what happens to, because my understanding is that there's essentially a hard drive in the copy machine that retains anything that was ever copied on it, and that unscrupulous people are buying secondhand copy machines that have been taken out of service and pulling those drives out and being able to get sensitive information like social security numbers and medical records and things, because everything that gets copied on the copy machine is somehow retained. So are we taking steps to make sure that when we transition out that we're guarding against that?
Yes, we are. Yes. Historically, with most of the copiers that we do have, we've retained them longer than that service contract, so we pay the dollar and we keep the machine. When those machines finally are to the point where we just cannot utilize them anymore, those are taken out of service, the same process that happens. We physically pull out the hard drive that's in that machine. We have a company that comes out and crushes that hard drive and provides us some verification that those machines, those hard drives are been destroyed, yes.
Give me a motion.
I'll move to approve.
Second. You voted no? No. So I can listen once. You can't change it. Oh, it's a yes. That's 5-0.
So, Mayor, I wanted to share with the rest of the council, we have As you all know, Deanna Eliano retired from the city of Hemet probably a few weeks ago, and so we have an individual that we've retained through a contracting firm to help get us through this transition. And so I wanted to take the opportunity to have him introduce himself, briefly tell the council about his background, and then also let the public, see who the individual will be in community development that will help usher in and get us through this transition. So with that being said, Nelson Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Lopez. I'm Nelson Miller. I'm a principal with MIG Hogle, Ireland. I worked in cities for 19 years, primarily as a planning director and community development director. I worked for the last 20 years for MIG Hogle, Ireland, providing services to city governments. And usually, again, I was serving as a planning director or community development director. I've served in a dozen cities of varying sizes, but oftentimes in relatively small cities like Hemet. Some cities that are growing very fast, some cities that are like Hemet that are more stationary in terms of their development. So I've done pretty much everything there is to do in planning. I've prepared general plans, development codes, specific plans, airport land use plans. I've processed untold amounts of current development. So I've got a lot of experience, 35 years in planning, most of it serving in management positions. And the opportunity came up to help the city of Hemet, and I said to Deanna this afternoon when she came by to fill me in on some things, I said, are we planners because of the way we are, or are we the way we are because we're planners? But there is something I feel like that's common in planning, and that's that we care and we're passionate, and I'm glad to be here to help the city of Hemet. Thank you.
Thank you, Nelson.
Welcome, and we thank you for coming to work with us. We hope to keep you real busy.
I'm sure you will.
Next item, communications from the public. Anyone who wishes to address the council should have submitted a request to speak form. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes in consideration of others who are here for agenda items. Please come forward to the lectern when your name is called. State law prohibits the city council from discussing any item not on the agenda except for brief responses and statements made or questions posed by the public. In addition, we may ask a question for clarification. Sarah, do we have anybody wishing to speak? No. Hearing that, we'll move on. And we come to the time of public hearing. Item number 16, weed abatement. Fire Chief Brown.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Tonight before you, it's recommended the City Council conduct a public hearing to hear any protests and objections to the proposed removal of weeds, rubbish, and refuse per Resolution 4865 adopted by the City Council on May 28, 2019. The Fire Department, as you well know, is tasked with conducting the annual weed abatement program under provisions of the California Government Code, Section 39560, in accordance with the provisions of Section 30-31 of the Hemet Municipal Code and Section 1103.2 of the Uniform Fire Code in order to mitigate fire hazards associated with combustible weeds, rubbish, and refuse. And I will acknowledge that we do have an abundance of grass growth this year. But we're placing focus, three tiers to this. We're engaging our fire operations personnel. We'll have an active role in doing the inspections. We've just mailed out over 1,000 letters. We're working collaboratively, a better term, with our businesses and reaching out to achieve self-compliance. So today is the formal, we're going to button up the official process through resolution to pursue those that have not abated their properties and go through the legal process with that. So with that, I'll defer to our city clerk for the next step.
We'll now open the public hearing. Sarah, do we have anybody wishing to speak on this item? Then I'll close the public hearing. Does council have any comments or questions?
I didn't know if I've seen a lot of people out plowing their very large fields, and so I didn't know if it was because you sent letters out or if it was because of those fires you guys were putting out.
I think a little bit of everything. We're really reaching out on social media to get everybody's attention. They need to act now, so we're seeing some of the fruits of those labor.
And nice save on Stony Mountain.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Michael?
I saw over the last couple of days, you guys were doing some weed abatement already with just burning it instead of flating it or killing it or whatever they do.
We don't do controlled burns. No, the light went on when you said that. I would like to reference, we're working very closely with the realtors in the area with parcels. They've been very cooperative, and they're helping us work with their clients to get the parcels that need to be cleared.
Very good.
So I just wanted to
And
recognize
speaking
that.
of that, I know that our Association of Realtors is going to be putting a community cleanup day together. So that's still to be determined, but it'll be helpful. We'll identify, and I want to work with you and with the city manager to identify some areas that we might be able to go out and.
Absolutely. I'm still grinning because you got me on that last one. That was good.
Chief, and council too, I wanted to echo what Councilmember Myers said. The team did a great, outstanding job last week. Fire department, police department, the finance department, public works department. I mean, it was a real collaborative effort. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone got that kudos because, I mean, it was a pretty phenomenal and remarkable how everyone came together that day. So I wanted to make sure that everyone knew that they did an incredible job.
Very proud of that. Thank you very much. Our team's really good. Appreciate it.
Okay, there's no action required in this item, so with that, thank you, Chief.
Good. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Next item, item 17, establishing an infrastructure commission, Public Works Director Jensen and Principal Engineer Vestal.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Mr. Underwood is going to help me with my technical difficulties here. So, before I get started, with the number that you added for grant funding, I was going to share, but it wasn't pulled, and I'm okay with that off of consent that we also had about another $400,000 over the last couple of years in turf rebate money.
Right.
So you can add that to your
I will.
300,000. So, okay, we have been talking in multiple discussions about different commissions over the last few months. And so we are returning to you. I say we because Robert Vestal is here in spirit. While he is not here tonight, this is something that we've been working on together, as well as with legal and your interim city manager. So we're talking about the proposed ordinance bill number 19-031, which would basically repeal the Park Commission, the existing Traffic and Parking Commission, and establish a new commission that we have appropriately named the Infrastructure Commission that would kind of take into account combining functions of both. So how did we get here? Just a quick background. There's a lot of information here, but obviously the original Park and Traffic and Parking Commissions were created many, many moons ago, probably pre-Chris at the City, probably sometime in the 80s, 70s, before that. There have been very few updates to the duties of those commissions, and so we definitely have been talking for a number of years, even prior to the council that's sitting now, about the effectiveness and efficiency of those two commissions. We've also seen the community needs have really changed because we have more people in the city than we did 40 years ago, 30 years ago. There's a lot higher demand. There's also a higher demand for expediency. And what we find is that a lot of the things that we do through these commissions, that through the municipal code are required to go through the commissions, do not let us quite be as efficient anymore as maybe we used to be able to be back in the day when the demands aren't what they were now. We also had an economic downturn that really impacted what we did at the commissions. So when we saw the economy change back to 2007, and we saw development drop off, and we saw funding go away with RDA, we really saw the absence of projects for these commissions to kind of have something meaty to chew on, something substantial to work on. And I personally have been involved with both commissions since that time, before that. And what we've really seen is the commissions really kind of disintegrate into almost administrative busy work, as opposed to really having things that they can contribute to that the community can get engaged in. We've obviously had council direction in a few different ways over the last 6 months or so. We've talked about possible dissolution of, I think the Park Commission was one of our future agenda items. We talked about the need for maybe a Public Works Committee and just generally reviewing these two commissions. Staff has really experienced challenges with the Parks and the Traffic and Parking Commission, much to our dismay and frustration, as well as I think sometimes to the frustration of those that are seated on those commissions. Because what we've found is we've had lack of actionable items, we've had frequent cancellations. In those moments when we have needed a meeting, there may have been a 6-month gap, and that meeting has been hard to get a quorum to show up to. I know that the city clerk, because we've had so many people on and off, has had to run multiple recruitments to fill those seats. So we really took a look at this, if you would, Scott, thanks, to develop this new commission with a purpose to serve city council, kind of a higher level, not so much administrative stuff, but really to provide advice and recommendations to the council, possibly other commissions, as well as our different departments, as we have projects and things that relate to our municipal infrastructure upgrades. And then also to have the commission really serve to advise city staff. So when we have some of those tough conversations, whether it's about traffic or park design, that we're not starting the conversation here. We have a commission that we're able to take it through. We also obviously want a commission that really best serves the public. So some of the ways that we think, and we worked for this new commission to do that, was to really be a forum for public education about our projects. I know lots of times we'll have the public come up and say, I didn't realize that was happening, or how do I get involved in that? This gives them an opportunity to do that. Brings about a little transparency too, about what we're kind of running on that treadmill in the background doing. It provides an opportunity for shared input on projects. We can have consideration of community comments by the commission that then can be passed on in written report format to the council. And we also looked at incorporating quarterly project update sharing at that commission so the public can come and hear about what we have going on. So our approach to evaluating what the commission should look like took into account reviewing the existing duties of the Parks and Traffic Commission, determining what functions from the 1980s were still relevant, and then adding new functions that would kind of fill in some of the gaps that we experience as staff and that we've heard from you as council. So we really worked hard, like I said, with legal, our principal engineer, as well as our city attorney, to develop the structure and operational parameters of a commission that would be effective, but could also be adequately supported by the limited staff we have now. So as we move into this, we really looked at stripping anything that could be handled administratively so that we can provide good, fast customer service to our public when they have those requests, and really having this focus more on kind of the, like I said, kind of meatier projects or things that are really impactful to the community. So ultimately, as we develop the functions of the commission, you can find a really detailed list in the ordinance bill. It really breaks these things down. But just in summary of the functions of the infrastructure commission we're proposing, it really sets the commission's duties to review and provide feedback and recommendations on things like municipal facility master plans, our CIP, any type of vehicle and pedestrian safety measures, so things like your speed limits and maybe some of your signage and crosswalks. Any kind of studies related to speed, which we've experienced some of that recently. Matters related to public transportation, parking, and any projects that might be proposed in the right-of-way. Park, street, and landscape standards, and then standards for care of various public facilities, whether it's parks or our tree trimming maintenance and that kind of thing. What I will say in terms of this review and recommendation is that the way that we have written these functions, while it does outline and is pretty specific about the types of things the commission will be involved in, it also leaves a little bit of leeway so that if we know a tree removal is a normal tree removal and doesn't need to wait 30 days for somebody to say yes or no, we're going to handle it. But if it's something bigger, if there's other things tied to it, it's something that we can bring to the commission. So we kind of have that flexibility with many of the items that are on this review and recommend side. And then in addition to that, we plan to regularly review our active and planned public works projects. We would be looking for the commission to help us prioritize circulation projects out of the general plan that might be brought forward to the council. Again, review of any new parks or open space. One of the keys too would be to have the commission really be a sounding board to hear appeals of any administrative decisions that somebody didn't like related to infrastructure. So while we work to pull the administratively handled stuff away, if there are any disagreements, rather than having them come here to council, they would go through this commission first, and the commission would provide a recommendation to council on the ultimate decision. Finally, very important part of our park commission, while we had a lot of busy work, if you will, one of the key pieces of the park commission was to remain intact because it is one of the requirements of us maintaining our Tree City USA status, which we've got 33 years in, I think now, 32, 33 years in. So this board will serve as that as well. So at this point, what we did is we took a look at setting the new infrastructure commission up similar in ways to what we had with the previous two commissions. Excuse me, one sec. So we retained 5 seated members appointed by City Council. What we did do is extended the term from 2 years to 4. And here's why. We are looking not at monthly meetings. Previously we had 2 commissions and we were coordinating monthly meetings for both every month. Canceling, you still have to go through a lot of the same work just to cancel a meeting as you would to have one. You have to post it, you have to do an agenda, the whole shebang. So we're looking at going with a bi-monthly meeting schedule on odd months of the year. And then what we did is we slipped the regular meeting time for this commission right into where the park commission would have been on those months. So we're not disrupting any other meetings that would normally be happening. We're just reducing the number of meetings a year to 6, which is why we went ahead and doubled the term to 4 years. So that being said, if there is a need for additional special meetings, we have that opportunity, just like the City Council does, to schedule those. Vacancies would be filled through solicited recruitments. So if someone resigns, if someone comes to the end of their service life, however that is, we're able to do that the same way we would for any other commission. We obviously will continue to follow the Brown Act requirements, and public meetings notice the same way as we've done in the past. Like I mentioned, written reports to council. And then as far as the staffing, the ordinance itself gives the city manager the authority to assign, the staff member to who is kind of coordinating that. Robert and I work very well together. We've already talked about the fact that it would definitely be a shared responsibility between us. So that's not a problem for us. So the next step, so today we're talking about just introducing the ordinance bill, again, that would repeal the Park Commission, would repeal the Traffic and Parking Commission, and would establish the Infrastructure Commission. What would need to happen next, should the council opt to approve its introduction, is we would go ahead and bring the ordinance back for consideration of actual adoption on June 25th at a public hearing. Is that correct, Sarah? Public hearing? Or Eric, I'm sorry. We're just bringing it back, regular, okay. And then at that time, we would go ahead and instruct the city clerk to start recruitment to fill those 5 seats. And then July 25th, thereabouts, the ordinance requires a 30-day kind of waiting period before it's in effect. So we really wouldn't have a commission established until about July 25th. And given the amount of time it takes for recruitment and kind of where we land and getting ourselves positioned to do some orientation with newly seated people, we would probably be looking at our first meeting at the end of September. So with that, staff recommendation is to go ahead, introduce, read by title only, and waive further reading of an ordinance repealing the existing Park Commission and Traffic and Parking Commission and establish a new Infrastructure Commission, which is Ordinance Bill 19-031. And if you, one more, have any questions, that is not our pothole, but it is a fancy question mark pothole, so I have to use
Before we
it.
go to council questions, Sarah, is there anyone from the public that wishes to speak on this item? Now we will go to council questions. Anybody?
I do. On terms, we don't have term limits set in there. So I don't know if we probably ought to do that since our community voted, right, in 2010 to put term limits on elected officials. You know, it's 3 years, or three terms of 3-4 years, whatever it needs to be. There needs to be something.
The term limit ordinance adopted by the public doesn't apply to appointed boards and commissioners, although the city council could adopt a term limit by ordinance if it chose to, or it could impose a term limit on this specific committee if it would like. That's not incorporated in the draft ordinance.
I've got a comment about the 4-year appointment.
Sure.
All the other commissions, and I understand the rationale behind it is because it's an every other month
Correct.
thing. However, the council is elected to a 4-year term, and all the other commissions are a 2-year term for the reasoning that the council members are the ones that appoint. And so if you get a commissioner that was appointed by a council member who is no longer elected, and that person is now a new council member coming on, could be, I don't want to say stuck with that person, but if the council member has somebody else
Limits that
they-
opportunity for representation to change. Right.
Wasn't that the same when council members, aren't elected or choose not to run and they still have a
It is,
time
and
limit?
I give you a prime example of that. So when I was on the planning commission and Shelley Milne was elected, because I was appointed by Jim Foreman, and when Shelley Milne was elected, when my appointment time, when it was up for my appointment, which was just a few months later, I called her and said, hey, listen, if you don't want to reappoint me, I will not resubmit my application. So that's kind of otherwise I would have been the person for the next 2 years. And she wouldn't have had the opportunity to appoint somebody new if she chose to.
Now, if the philosophy of the council members change and they have to deal with the person that has a different philosophy, I get what you're saying.
I'm just saying it to give that the elected official has the opportunity to appoint somebody to a commission.
And we are absolutely open to changes in this draft. Like I said, the only reason that we placed the 4-year on it was because of the fact that it would be 6 meetings a year. So a 2-year appointment, right?
I understand that, but it
So-
goes back to an appointed position is appointed by an elected official.
Right.
And so they're, in a sense, they are held by that appointed, or by that elected
Yes.
person? Or is
So,
there,
we can absolutely make the changes to the draft when we return it.
How do other
and bring it
council
back.
members feel about that? Can I get a comment? There, that's
Well,
an issue.
Yeah, I think there's some merit to the issue that he's raising, and kind of along similar lines, since we're talking about initiating a brand new commission, I see there's always a value to having terms expiring not all at one time. So
And
would
these
be
do
established-
stagger. These do stagger. Per the resolution, what we did establish during the setup is that certain seats would be 2 years the first round, so that we did have that staggering happening. But I understand where Councilmember Percival is coming from in terms of having that long-term maybe impact changes that may occur. But I believe that we had set it up so that the seat, Eric, rode with the 4-year term of the seats that we have now, so.
Well, if we have, current commissioners are 2-year terms, right?
Yes.
So if we started the brand new commission with 2 of the seats being a 2-year term, or 3 of the seats being a 2-year term, and 2 seats being a 4-year term, with the proviso that at the following transition, they would revert to a 2-year term, if that makes sense. So you get the stagger.
Right. Let me
However you need to
grab the
shuffle that.
So if you take a look at the proposed ordinance bill that's attached to the staff report, and you look at, it would be on page 2, section 2-222, item C. And again, just as reference, not pushing a 4-year term, we can do whatever you guys want to do, but that is how we begin staggering when we initiate a new commission with the 4-year term. So essentially what you're looking at is that they're staggered in 2-year intervals, and seats on the commission would be, as you are, numbered 1 through 5. Seats 1, 2, and 3 would initially have a term of 2 years, and then those seats would be up for reappointment or appointment of new members, and then the newcomers would have 4-year terms at that point. But I believe that it follows the terms of seated council members now, correct, Eric?
Well, it's not going to follow exactly, because these people are going to be appointed in July.
Got it.
So the terms are going to run from July. It's not a problem to move to initial 2-year terms for 3, and then 1-year terms for 2, and then they'll come back for 2, and then they'll just stagger every other year. It's a simple change.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, for 2-year term, 2-year term, not a 4-year term.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that makes more sense.
Okay.
The other commissions are like that too.
Okay.
Yep, happy to.
Whatever achieves that the most efficiently.
well, and
I
think
will
too,
work with the city attorney to get that language.
Looking at this, if you've got a council member makes an appointment for a 4-year appointment, and then that council member is now up for reelection, or doesn't run, or doesn't get elected, now you've got somebody that was appointed by somebody who's no longer on council, and the new council member wouldn't have that opportunity. Based on how I'm reading it.
I'm good with it.
Councilmember, that does raise an issue that's not directly provided in this ordinance, but currently all commissioners are elected by the majority of the body, not by individual council members. I think it has been a practice that individual council members get to review for their commission, but the council could, if it wanted to, memorialize that such that each council member could directly appoint a specific person just on their appointment authority without having the full council do that. Some cities do it that way. What you have here is a little bit of a modified. It comes to the full council for a recommendation, and then it has to be voted on by a majority. We wouldn't make that change, but if the council's interested in going to direct appointments of commissioners by council members, we can do an ordinance to that effect that would take effect.
I wasn't alluding at a direct appointment, but that making that recommendation.
Okay.
I have a couple questions. You said that you and Robert work well together.
Correct.
I understand and appreciate that. And I wholeheartedly endorse the concept of blending the two commissions into what will be a much more viable and meaningful commission that will do all of the things that we hope it will. In my former life as a municipal staffer in a different city, we had a similar commission that was called Traffic and Transportation, and it dealt with mostly traffic engineering and traffic safety issues. Didn't get into parks because they had a parks commission. But that commission was primarily staffed by the city engineer because most of the things they dealt with were engineering type topics. And the PD had a staff representative that supported that commission as well, because oftentimes in the discussions, even if it's an engineering item, it went off into a tangent about enforcement or something along those lines. So I just ask that we give some really good thought to staffing, because even if you're sharing, I think there needs to be a primary staff person that is responsible for putting the agenda together and
right.
kind of collating agenda items, prioritizing things. And just give some thought to that, because it would establish a definitive person that if I want to get something on this commission agenda, this is the person that I go to. So
sure.
I'm not trying to micromanage it, but just give some thought to that. Also, in the initial recruitment, I think it would be beneficial, and you may already be planning to do this, have some kind of a statement that defines the ideal commissioner candidate, what kinds of work experience or educational background or whatever they might have that would best fit and meet that ideal candidate. I think that would be helpful in the recruitment process, and maybe narrow the field down to people that would be ideal for it.
Sure, and I know that when we went through a number of other cities, different commissions and documents and forms that they use for their recruitments, and some do have not only those statements, but also kind of a more thorough questionnaire than maybe kind of what we have used in the past. I haven't had the opportunity to talk to the interim city manager about that, but I think it's definitely something we can discuss. And then just quickly, in terms of kind of the person who is the contact, Robert and I have talked, and because the bulk of these do lean towards the transportation side and there's a lot more, I think, that came from the Traffic and Parking Commission function than did maybe from the Park Commission function. Robert will most likely be the lead on the commission, and in terms of the support, I'll be there. Obviously, I have projects, I'll be taking them forward. And in terms of the coordination, we're going to talk about what staff member might be the best for that, but we still need to have those conversations with the city managers.
Yeah, those are all valid questions. The items prior to, or in the Traffic Commission, obviously were handled by engineering. They've got the administrative staff that could assist with that. I think your points on the additional staff as needed are well taken too. I know that as items come up, it may warrant some discussions with PD or fire or other affected departments, so you're absolutely spot on that as needed, those other support individuals need to be at the table too.
And I think we actually identified that in the ordinance. I think one of the last paragraphs mentions that we could potentially have fire, PD, and other departments at the table based on the topic at hand. So.
And the other thing, I think you touched on it, Chris, was we really looked at a lot of other cities and their commissions and how they structured theirs, and we had a pretty collaborative discussion about